Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're back. You know, it's so interesting how much good information is coming at us today and in real time. And if you're actually listening and you're taking the time to tune in, you can make some dramatic changes with your health and well-being. Every day we learn new things. And even though you're kind of an old dog in the field like me and you've been in here for well over 4.5 decades, you continue to learn every single day. And I want everybody to know that you're never going to stop learning, and that's okay, because it means that the field is continually changing. We're evolving. We're going through a metamorphosis all the time. Life is changing. So as long as you're tuned in and you're listening, I hope you're going to learn a lot when you come to this podcast. Remember, go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. You've probably gone there already. Send your friends there. They can click on the Honest Health Podcast logo and go right to Spotify. And you can also click on the YouTube icon and go right to the YouTube channel, and you can watch the interviews as well. Bring your friends. Now, this is new to me, so if it says click it, subscribe to it, or whatever, do all of those. That way we can always stay in touch. Well, today I think you're going to be very, very happy. It's going to be a great show. One of my favorite guests, and I'm a big fan of, Cheryl Meyers, is going to be with us today, and we're going to be talking about the brain and mental function and focus. I think something that a lot of us are focusing on. I know for me, it's kind of a tough situation because I have Alzheimer's and dementia in my family, pretty spread throughout the entire family. So it's kind of something that I'm always trying to stay ahead of. And then, of course, we live in a world today where there's a lot more stress and a lot more things going on that have really kind of added to this problem. So we're going to be talking about some things today I think that you might find extremely interesting. Let me give you a little bit of a background. Cheryl is Chief of Scientific Affairs for Europharma. She's a healthcare professional with certifications in cancer, pain control, and the issues of aging. She's an expert in dietary supplements and natural medicines who has been a featured guest on hundreds of radio and television shows. She's been interviewed by the New York Times, Prevention Magazine, the Wall Street Journal as well. Cheryl's a member of the editorial board of the Natural Medicine Journal, and her own published research has included topics such as menopause, diabetes, sleep disorders, and gastrointestinal function. As an expert educator on natural medicine, Cheryl has been invited to give educational presentations at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, the Jefferson Myrna Brine Center of Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and other healthcare organizations across the United States as well. Help me welcome my guest. Hey, Cheryl.
Hello, it's so delightful to be able to visit with you today.
I'm so glad to have you. You know, you and I have a history of doing radio shows, but for me, this is the first we get to actually see each other, and how fun is that? How's everything in your neck of the woods?
Everything is fine. You know, Green Bay has 6 beautiful days a year, and today is one of them.
But who's counting?
Yes.
You know, interestingly enough, when we chose this topic today, it is something that I really hold near and dear to my heart. And you know, sometimes they say that a lot of these issues are brought on by lifestyle choices and dealing with the things we deal with every day. But I'm seeing a lot more people that are dealing with mental health issues, but also memory and cognitive issues. And it's not traditionally the same group that it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. I'm seeing it throughout all age groups. And what do you think?
I think that we are living in a sea of inflammatory triggers. I think that we are exposed to toxins that have never before existed in the history of the planet. I think that I think we're living in the middle of a giant science experiment. And our bodies just have challenges they never had before. At the same time, because of advances in medicine, advances in nutrition, people are living longer than they ever have before. So you get this combination of external stressors that can increase dysfunction while at the same time living longer. So you're seeing people at older and older ages. I think it's kind of a perfect storm for starting to have more and more difficulties with changes in thinking as we age. And I'm with you. Some of these changes can start happening pretty young. And there's just so much we can do for prevention and so much we can do to help keep our brains in the good shape we want them to be in.
You know, people that I know travel the world, and a lot of people in our industry are world travelers. They travel, they lecture and around the country. And I always kind of ask them questions. I mean, do they see things in that part of the world that we see here? And it's amazing how many places around the world where people in their upper years are cognitively strong and balanced, and it's not even part of a cultural issue there. But over here, I mean, do we blame diet? Do we blame stress? I mean, how much control do we have over it, and how much is genetic?
Well, there is a little bit of a genetic component, and that plays out both directly and indirectly. Directly meaning that you may have a predisposition. There are certain genes that if you get the dysfunctional form, you have a slightly increased risk for dementia. But I don't want people to think that if your mother had Alzheimer's disease, that automatically you're going to have Alzheimer's disease. That's not the way it works. There's also other genes that dictate the efficiency of other systems in our body. So let's just pick one. Let's pick the liver. If you are a fantastic detoxifier, if your liver is Superman, if you are getting rid of toxins as they come your way and getting them out of your body quickly, your chances of dementia are much lower because you just don't have the toxic exposure. If you inherited the genes that your liver is a bit slow, or if you've developed some problems with your health, your lifestyle that slowed down your liver function, you're going to have higher levels of toxic exposure. There are genes that increase your risk or decrease your risk for diabetes. And if there is one thing that I could encourage people to do to prevent unhealthy brain changes, that is get your blood sugar back in the normal range, whatever it takes, because high levels of blood sugar trigger three things that lead to dementia. Number one, chronic inflammation in the brain. Chronic inflammation. Number two, chronic oxidative stress in the brain. And number three, what we see is a slowdown in the ability of the brain to get rid of waste materials and make new brain cells. So those are things that we need to pay close attention to. In fact, and I bet you've heard this before as well, there are some researchers that call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes.
You hit on a really interesting point. I have a friend, and she's older, and I've been trying to get her to get a physical and get things tested, and she found out that her sugar was off the charts, and
Oh my.
we kind of knew it. So they've got it under control, and now she's doing it with a Mediterranean diet, and she's taking wonderful supplementation. And the interesting thing is, she said, since she has this now in range, her A1C is in a normal range, she's exercising again. She had lost a son and lost a husband, and she just kind of crawled inside the refrigerator, basically, gained a lot of weight, and but she's lost all that. The other thing she told me the other day was, she said, my cognitive function is so much better now than it's been in the last couple years. So to your point, I never thought about it that way, but I mean, that's part of it, because I know my grandmother and my great aunts and uncles, and cognitive functions were a big problem, but also many of them were diabetics as well.
Right. And diabetes also increases your risk for stroke.
Yeah.
And stroke is another thing that causes changes in thinking, changes in cognitive function, or even dementia. So when you have uncontrolled blood sugar, or blood sugar that's not very well controlled, it's irritating as heck. We make that analogy to pouring, if you're a mean person and you want to get even with someone, they pour sugar into a gas tank of a car and it ruins the engine. Well, that's kind of what happens here. When our blood sugar gets too high, it starts to ruin some of the mechanical devices in our body, including our brain. Our brain has a lot of mechanistic aspects, including the blood flow that has to get to our brain. And if we start to damage that interior lining of those blood vessels, it's going to make them more prone to getting clogged, which means poor delivery of blood, which contains nutrients and oxygen. It can make the blood vessel walls weaker, meaning they could rupture, and it could, lead to abnormal blood clot production, which, if it gets caught in a blood vessel, causes a stroke. So we're not here today to talk about diabetes, and there's certainly interventions that can help people with blood sugar, including diet changes, absolutely, and some wonderful natural medicines. But I'm just saying that is a big risk factor, and that's probably the first thing that anyone who wants to keep Anyone who still wants to be able to do calculus when you're 101, or at least Sudoku, if you want good brain function into old age, pay attention to your blood sugars.
Well,
And okay, your blood pressure as well.
yeah.
Because it's often the two go hand in hand. If you're having problems with blood pressure as well, it puts a lot of strain on your blood vessels, which can increase inflammation, risks for blood clots, risks for ruptures, risks for heart attack and stroke.
You know that old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think that challenging our brain is part of this process as well. Continue to do things that are challenging. They used to say doing crossword puzzles, and to your point, Sudoku, of course. But I think a lot of people today are doing new things. They're learning a language, or learning a musical instrument, or doing something that going back to school, taking a class in their 70s. And I think that when we challenge our brain, maybe that's when we're able to possibly build some of those new blood cells and blood up there, build some new neural pathways, and do some things that make a difference. So I think some of this stuff we have to take responsibility for, but also, I think diet is a foundation of this. And if you had to recommend a diet, I mean, in general, for people that are 50 and older, do you have a preference of way you think people should be eating? I mean, would Mediterranean be a way to go?
Mediterranean is certainly a wonderful way to go. But it is also true that some people have different responses depending on what their issues are, their body types. There are some people with type 2 diabetes, for example, that do really well on a paleo or a keto diet, which is extraordinarily low carbohydrates. Other individuals may not respond as well to that. Some people respond well to being vegan. Some people are unhealthy if they become vegan. So there's just the right tool for the right job. If I were to give any advice, it would be eat more plants. Eat more plants and a little bit fewer grains. And if you're eating whatever your protein choice may be, make it as clean as possible.
I love that. And hydration, of course.
Hydration, absolutely.
I have a friend that's an ER triage physician. He said, Jeff, you'd be so surprised how many times people come in, and no matter what the problem is, 90% of them are dehydrated. And sometimes they come in and they're older and they're cognitively, and dehydration, affects their concentration. And, when they brought them in, they were having a hard time remembering who they were and their names and the date. And he said, dehydration is such an easy thing for us to resolve, but a hard thing for people to stay on. I was raised in the Midwest, and, with us, it was like water or nothing. And we lived in the country. We had well water. It was wonderful. I remember my mother saying for dinner every night, what would you like for dinner to drink, water or water? And that was kind of it. And it was funny because the water in our neighborhood was so good that they would bus us into the local city, and nobody in our neighborhood, none of the kids had acne. And we would go into the city and all the kids had acne. And we were kind of the outcast because we're the ones that did not. And the doctors always said, it's in the water.
Maybe.
And I continued to be a water drinker, and I think that's been really good. My grandmother made it to 97, well, in body. Cognitively, it was about 7 or 8 years before that it was a problem. But she was a huge water drinker too, and kind of that way in my family. But, I think what people are looking for today is, people always want a magic wand. They want the quick fix for everything. Obviously, diet, activity, watching things like blood sugar and blood pressure, getting adequate sleep, hydrating. That's a big one too, because I think we walk around exhausted so much of the time. Supplementation. Of course, I know we've talked before, having a good solid foundation, maybe a multiple, maybe omega-3s and some foundational basic nutrients. But where's the next step people should go? There's a lot of choices out there for the brain functioning, memory, cognitive category.
Absolutely. Well, the natural medicine, the dietary supplement that I think is again very foundational, in addition to your omega-3s and in addition to your multivitamin and mineral formula, should also be included every single day, and that's curcumin. Curcumin is not turmeric. It comes from turmeric, but turmeric is only 2 to 4% curcumin. And when you're trying to use it as a medicine, you've got to go straight to the curcumin and wipe out the middleman. You just don't get enough in turmeric. Although turmeric's an awesome healthy food. If you like it, eat it every day. The problem with curcumin is it doesn't absorb very well. So you need to look at enhanced absorption. The clinically studied form that has the most published human trials is called BCM95 curcumin. And they use turmeric essential oil embedded in every single flake of curcumin, and it boosts absorption about 7-fold. It also enhances the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier about 14-fold. And we have BCM95 in our line of curcumin products sold into the Terry Naturally line. Now, some of the studies on curcumin are just amazing. Number one, it's the best, in my opinion, the best natural anti-inflammatory out there. Inflammation is not one event. It's several things happening at one time. There's a lot of moving parts, and curcumin touches every single moving part of the inflammatory process to downregulate or to tamp down inflammation. So number one, when we talked about inflammation being a contributing factor, getting that inflammation down, excellent idea. It's also a super potent antioxidant. One way that the United States Department of Agriculture measures the antioxidant properties of food is something called the ORAC value, ORAC, oxygen radical absorbance capacity. So for 100 grams, they measure per 100 grams. 100 grams of strawberries is about a 3,500 ORAC. Blueberries, a little bit better, 6,000 ORAC. Dark chocolate powder, ooh la la, I like dark chocolate, about a 40,000 ORAC value, so very good antioxidant. When you look at this unique curcumin with the turmeric essential oil, that ORAC value is 1.1 million per 100 grams. So when you talk about super potent antioxidants, this is, as the kids would say, the bomb. I mean, it really makes a difference. So you've got two things that you're addressing: chronic inflammation, chronic oxidative stress. The third factor has to do with the creation of new brain cells. That process is called neurogenesis, and it's stimulated by, and we're getting a little too technical now. Not everybody you don't have to remember all these words, but just remember the process. There's a compound called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. BDNF also increase the ability of the brain to make new brain cells. And curcumin is the most powerful natural product out there that has been examined for increasing the process of neurogenesis. So making new brain cells is crucially important to create new neural pathways, to replace brain cells that have died of old age or other toxic exposure, and to expand and create new neural networks in our brain. So the baseline that I would add for anyone, regardless of whether they're worried about cognitive changes that are just the result of age, because they're worried about Alzheimer's disease, they have some other neurological disease, or whether they had TIAs or they're at risk for stroke, any of these reasons, that would be my all-purpose foundational ingredient as part of an anti-dementia protocol. And regardless of what stage you are in, even if you are having a lot of problems with forgetfulness, even if you're caring for your mom and your mother is, needing a little bit more one-on-one care, I'm not going to say that this is a cure. That would be cruel. It absolutely is not a cure. But for improving brain function, absolutely. Slowing down the process, absolutely. And if you can give people another year or two of good, healthy cognitive function, even if they're in a later stage, what a blessing that would be.
There's a story I've been wanted to say for today, and I hope that it fit into the conversation. I have a friend that uses a lot of supplements. She uses a lot of the Terry Naturally products, and she started taking Curamid and Curamed. She started using them together, and she said that was her winning, sweet spot combination. And she was having some cognitive problems, but she was also having so many other metabolic syndrome problems and pain and discomfort. So after about 6 months of being on the two products, a lot of those areas started correcting themselves to the point where they became very, very manageable. And it seemed like it was like she was this puzzle, and there was like 7 or 8 pieces that were missing. And every time that she got something under control, it filled in another one of those last pieces of the puzzle. And the last piece she put in was her focus and concentration. And what she said to me, and it kind of resonated, she said, Jeff, she said, it seemed like all those other problems were so brain overwhelming for me because I was living in a state of just trying to get through the day with all of these uphill speed bumps around me. She goes, as I started to level those off, it was like everything clicked and my memory just got so much better. So, was it an inflammatory situation? Most likely. Was it an out of balance? Absolutely. And it's amazing how things kind of fell in place for her. You could not get that Curamed out of her hand if you wanted to. And she tells everybody about it. She actually brings her friends to the health food store near her in LA and shows them exactly what it is that she's using, because everyone has seen a difference.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think that probably the best heavy lifter in those two products is the Curamed is our BCM 95, which our company has exclusivity to in the United States in independent health food stores. The Curamin, which is a natural pain relief formula.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ingredients is that BCM 95 curcumin with the turmeric essential oil. So she's getting a little bit extra super dose on board there by using both of them together.
I think it's wonderful. And, I think back sometimes where, we started in this industry, how we had little to no variety. It was, I was actually laughing with someone. I was at a health food store doing an event a couple months ago in Ohio. And we were walking around the store and I said, do you remember when there was like 2 kinds of natural chips? And there was like, maybe 1 or 2 forms of vitamin C. And we really didn't have a variety. I mean, it was hard to come up with topics back then for my radio shows, and today we have so much information, but I think we brought on a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation. And I think that even with social media, it can kind of be a double-edged sword where sometimes information comes out and people want to hear it so badly that they jump on it, but they didn't ask any other questions to go along with it. So that was my purpose for moving over to a podcast, to have great minds here. So if someone comes and they listen, they're going to walk away and they're going to say, I get it now. I have a choice, but I need to do a little homework. I need to make some corrections. The Magic Wand store is not open. I need to make sure that I'm asking the right questions and that I'm being responsible for my own health. And I think it's getting better. And it seems to me that there's a lot of younger people that are starting to think about it now. So that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. And, sometimes people ask me, because I've worked in this industry for so long, if you could do one thing, what would be that one thing to, to do the best for your health? And I know what they're asking. They're asking which supplement, but naming a supplement is not my answer. My answer is develop a relationship with a quality independent health food store where the staff is devoted to natural health, where they have weeded out some of the bad players, because unfortunately there are bad players in our industry, just like there are in any industry. There's bad players in the shoe industry or the food industry or the pharmaceutical industry. But that doesn't mean that there aren't legitimate, scientifically studied, clinically investigated ingredients that can make tremendous differences in your health. So that's one of the things I say, let somebody else do the homework for you. Go somewhere where people are up to date, where they're paying attention, they're devoted to education, and they can provide you with the information to make the best choice and make good recommendations. What I personally look for when I'm looking at a supplement is I look, number one, at the stability of the company that's selling the product. Where's it from? Is this an online only company where I can't even pin down a physical address? Or is this a legit company, and is it inspected by the FDA, and, that kind of thing. The other thing I look for is the ingredients. Have they been used, in published human or scientific trials? Is there actual published research in peer-reviewed journals on these specific ingredients? Because you have to think that even if you may not be able to get out your microscope and look at the supplement to see what makes it tick, that the researchers have been able to do that, and that's why they have selected it for use in their trials. So that's one of the reasons why, as I say, to me, the number one thing that I recommend for, quite honestly, just about anyone for anything, is our curcumin, which our highest strength one is our Curamed, because of the fact that it is the most clinically studied. We have over 90 studies specifically on our ingredient, and of them, 41 are human clinical trials. And many of those have to do with things like major depressive disorder, which is a brain illness that refers back to oxidative stress and inflammation, and cognitive function, including a study that showed that our curcumin crosses the blood-brain barrier about 14 times better than plain curcumin. If you cannot reach your destination, you're not going to get the benefits that you expect.
Very, very true. And thank you for that. That it's giving us, we're talking clarity and cognitive, but that does provide clarity. Makes people want to spend their money wisely. And of course, we do have a very impatient world, who it doesn't matter how long it took us to get into this position. We want it fixed by Friday, and who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, we have to also realistically understand that it does take some time. But the faster people are able to notice even a change, even a little bit of movement, even a little bit of positive reinforcement, they're more apt to stay on what they're doing, and maybe be a little bit more focused. Because I think your positivity and your motivation are kind of tied together. And if you're happy about what you're doing and you're not complaining about it the whole time, like being on a diet, we complain the whole time, because we treat a diet like a short-term thing rather than a long-term making changes. We complain about it the whole time, and then we end up falling off because we weren't even supporting ourselves.
Right.
And that's just the American way,
I hear you.
So when someone starts using this, is there two questions I have for you that are going to come up? People that are they may be hearing about curcumin for the very first time. Is it something they can use every day long term?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's many studies on long-term use, and many of the health problems for which it's been investigated are long-term health problems. So that's excellent. You have wonderful, instead of side effects, you have side benefits.
I love
So
that.
let's say you're using curcumin because you want to use, for example, our Curamed 750 product. You're using it to keep your brain healthy. Awesome. You also are getting additional support for your heart, additional support for your liver, additional support for your skin, additional support for your joints. So those are the kind of side effects, or rather side benefits, I can live with. It's a great, as I said, overall supplement for people to use. That's the base of the pyramid. But there are a few newer things that I find very intriguing. One of them is called Greek mountain tea. And everybody gets this confused with green tea because the letters are so similar. But Greek mountain tea has nothing to do with green tea. Number one, it doesn't contain caffeine. Number two, it's an herbal. It's not in the tea family. It's a botanical called Sideritis scardica. And quite honestly, I had never heard of this before. It's relatively well known in the Mediterranean. This was used, sometimes it's called shepherd's tea, because shepherds, when they were up in the mountains, having to have a lot of stamina, sometimes it get cold at night, they would collect this herb and make a tea with it with hot water and drink it for stamina and as something of a tonic. Well, researchers became really interested. Well, what's in this Greek mountain tea? What's in this shepherd's tea that is providing all these health benefits? And they found a whole array of compounds that do indeed help to relieve inflammation, but they also help people with calming down after hard work, reducing stress and anxiety, promoting healing, preserving memory, and increasing stamina and resilience. So it contains a grouping of unique polyphenols that you don't find in other plant families. And the one that contains the most of them in the Sideritis family, of course, is the Sideritis scardica. So it has some excellent published clinical studies showing that it can provide enormous benefits. One looked at an animal model of Alzheimer's disease, and one of the things we see in Alzheimer's is a buildup of a protein called beta amyloid. They sometimes call it amyloid beta, beta amyloid plaque, tau protein. These are all referring to the same process. It's gunk that gets stuck in the brain, and then it interferes with how the brain functions. In this animal model, using Greek mountain tea reduced beta amyloid buildup in the brain by 55%.
Oh my.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
in a human study, they were looking at reaction time. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think my reaction time has slipped a little bit. Somebody throws something at me, I think about it a little bit too long before I reach my hand up to grab it. So they did a study in reaction time, and they found that it improved reaction time under stress by a whopping 50%. They also, in another study of adults aged 50 to 70, so a little bit on the older side, they did a 4-week study and showed that not only did it significantly improve attention, it reduced stress and anxiety. Now, Greek mountain tea on its own has been studied for all of these different brain benefits, but then there's another herb, an Ayurvedic herb called Bacopa monnieri. And what we do is we combine the Greek mountain tea with the Bacopa because each of them do impact cognitive health and brain function, but they do it in somewhat different ways. So therefore, when you put the two together, you really get some great benefits. Just looking at Bacopa on its own, there have been some studies looking at using Bacopa over time for intellect and memory issues. When we look at dementia, they have something called the Global Deterioration Scale, or GDS, and they assess people using a variety of different questionnaires, and they figure out if they get a score of 1, they have no cognitive decline at all. The worst is 6 or 7, which means that they have moderate to severe dementia. If you score a 2 on this test, it's age-appropriate memory loss. 3 is mild impairment. You're still living at your home, but you're starting to get pretty frustrated because you are forgetting things or you're missing appointments. 4 is mild dementia. You might need a little extra support in balancing the checkbook. 5 is moderate cognitive decline. You may be able to live at home if you have help, but you also may need to live in some kind of a facility. And as I said, 6 to 7 is more severe dementia. So the folks in this study were all assessed on average to be at stage 4, mild dementia. They used Bacopa twice a day for 3 months. And by the end of the study, when they redid the testing, their score was a 2, age-appropriate memory loss. So this is really, I love what you said earlier about having patience. You have to have patience with natural supplements. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, they're not going to work in a day or two to fix all your problems. I wish they did, but you're going to have some patience. And if you stick with it, you're going to have some amazing results. There's also some studies that have been done on Greek mountain tea with Bacopa, using the two together. And they have found that the Greek mountain tea has a much greater effect on acute mental processing. That means speedy mental processing, figuring things out, remembering words, remembering people's names, things that you have to do quickly. Bacopa affected the area of the brain associated with memory creation and storage. And if you don't have good memory creation and storage, you cannot learn anything new. You will not hold on to new facts or new ways of doing things. So that's why I love using these in combination. That Greek mountain tea, and the kind that's clinically studied, was called GMT23. That's just a specific designation. And it's in the Terry Naturally product, Greek mountain tea plus Bacopa.
Let me ask you a question. So these are now in a supplement form, because not everybody's a tea drinker like myself. So they would take it in is it like a capsule, or is it a tablet, or?
It's in a capsule, and I'm glad you said something about tea, because the tea is useful, but the extraction process pulls out even more compounds than what the hot water would when you're making tea. So it's more concentrated, and it has a wider array of polyphenols. So even if you drank 3 or 4 cups of the tea, you probably wouldn't get the health benefits of 1 capsule of that GMT23 Greek mountain tea. The other thing is, good luck finding it. It's starting to be a little bit more well-known. I mean, if you looked for it, you could probably find a few places where you could buy the tea in the U.S. And if you like it, it is a really healthy beverage, absolutely. But if you're using it for a specific issue, I'd absolutely go with supplementation so that you get dose-to-dose consistency and a higher concentration of the medicinal compounds.
You know, one of the drawbacks of being on the air for over 40 years is that every year I sit down at my kitchen table, and the vast amount of bottles of things that I use has grown exponentially through the years. And I always say, all right, I'm cutting things back. And then I do a show and I add 3 more things. So, because, to me, well, here's the question that's going to come in. Cognitively, I'm in good place, even though genetically I'm kind of tied to my bloodlines in my family. Would you consider these kind of individual products to be used for someone like me who constantly uses my brain, and I feel like I'm in perpetual brain cognitive overload many times? Should we already experiencing a problem, or can we hit it from the preventive side?
As far as prevention, as I said, CuraMed. In fact, I think every kid that graduates from high school should get a graduation present of a full bottle of CuraMed. If they started taking 1 a day, I swear to God, they would add 10 years onto their lifespan, just because of its impact on inflammation, oxidative stress, and the ability to help the liver do a better job of detoxification. So that's a great preventative for a wide variety of ails. When you're looking at using the Bacopa and the Greek mountain tea together, Could you use it prophylactically? Sure, absolutely. But most people, by the time they're over the age of 40, they're starting to do that word search thing, or they're running into people where they know them and they can't bring up the word. So even though that's not, please don't be alarmed if that's happening to you. That's normal. You know what I tell people is we have information in our brain. All that information's in filing cabinets. And the older you get, the more filing cabinets you have. So if you have to retrieve a single piece of information from a filing cabinet, at 70, it's going to take you longer than it did at 20 because you got more filing cabinets you got to sort through until you can find what you need. So it's just a normal consequence of getting a little bit older, but it does help with that. I'd get it on board sooner rather than later. However, it's never too late. I have my father-in-law is doing great. And he is a big part of our lives, love him to pieces. But he has noticed some issues with memory, and it's very, very frustrating for him. And just recently I started him, and because he gets all of his supplements through me, and I just said, go ahead, let's give this a try. So far, he's really liking it.
You know, what's interesting sometimes is that, you know, we try something and it just makes such a profound difference for very quickly for that individual. I was at a Expo West one year, years ago, and I remember coming to see you, and I had a migraine that was like my head. I wanted to just rip it off my shoulders and throw it. And I walked up to you and you gave me 2 sample packets of Curamid, and I took them both with a big glass of water. And within an hour, I came back and I was just like, oh my God. And it was gone. And it was just absolutely incredible. And it just worked so perfectly for me. I started taking it at that point. I've never stopped. And I carry it with me. I travel with it. It's something that goes in my suitcase. I never miss it. And I do both of them now. I do Curamed and Curamin. I do them both. And I take them every single day because I'm not a kid anymore. I'm turning 39 again this year. And it was just that introduction, you know, that because I think you're fantastic and you've got so much knowledge. I went, you gave it to me. I'm like, I'm taking it. Yeah. And I did. And I've become a big disciple of those 2 products. And thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those kind words. You know, when you look specifically at the 3 prongs of both the aging process and most chronic disease development, it's chronic oxidative stress, it's chronic inflammation, and it is sluggish liver. And curcumin touches every single one of those prongs, you know. So when you're using Curamed 750, you're having a dramatic reduction in oxidative stress because it's a very high ORAC value, dramatic reduction in chronic inflammation and inflammatory issues. And by the way, you're not always in pain. Just, you know, you can have inflammation and not necessarily be in pain. You can have inflammation in the lining of your blood vessels. You can have inflammation in your liver or your kidneys, not necessarily feel it. That doesn't mean it's not there. And it's also super fantastic at supporting a healthy liver, supporting the hepatocytes, helping the liver make more bile, which is a good thing because bile is the taxi cab that carries the toxins out of our body. So it touches every single one of those. So that's one of my core go-tos. And I will give it my highest compliment. Even though I work for the company and I get a big discount on the products that we sell, I would pay full retail for that product. I will be taking it for the rest of my life.
Well, I thank you so much. You have this incredible way of giving us reality, but also giving us solutions and possible ideas that could help us deal with that reality. And I think that's really important today. We don't need to sugarcoat things. Sometimes we just have to accept where we are and what we did and make those changes and, you know, and learn from, you know, choices that we made along the way. And I really appreciate that. If you could leave everyone today with a thought for the day, it could be on anything, just something you're thinking right now. What would you say?
Number 1, be kind. There's so much more kindness that we need in the world. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is strength. So, you know, if you can do one even slight additional kind act to think what a better world we would live in. But from a health standpoint, as I said before, I can't say strongly enough, work with someone you trust. Find someone who knows what they're doing. Let them do the homework for you. I work in this industry, and it's hard for me to sort through the hundreds and hundreds of different pieces of information that gets thrown my way to try to determine what's legitimate, what's smoke and mirrors, what's advertising, what's the real deal. It's not an easy job. And so, as I said, if you can find a relationship with a health practitioner or with an independent health food store that really pays attention to the cutting edge science, you're going to do yourself a huge favor.
Wow. Cheryl, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate this. This is wonderful. I hope you'll come back and see me again.
I always love to visit. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Jeffrey Burke here, the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke podcast. Remember, send your friends to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. They can click on the Honest Health icon and go right to Spotify. They can also click on the YouTube, and they can go see the YouTube. They can actually watch us in our gorgeousness in the morning, talking back and forth. But I hope you'll bring your friends, because remember, we all want each other to be as healthy as we possibly can. And this just might be the day that you show up and hear a podcast that hits home and maybe gives you a solution for what you're going through. Have a wonderful day, everyone. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.